On a triangular peninsula where Europe reaches toward Asia, where the waters of the Bosphorus carve the only sea passage between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, a Roman emperor stood in the year 324 and chose this ground for a city that would outlive his empire by more than 1,000 years. Constantine called it the New Rome. The world would call it Constantinople. And for 11 centuries, behind walls that no army could break, beneath a dome that seemed to float on light, this city would rule 2 continents and call itself the Queen of Cities. This is the complete story of that city. Not a fragment, not a single siege or a single emperor. The full journey from the moment Constantine's surveyors marked the line of the first walls to the day the last Byzantine emperor fell defending a breach near the gate of St. Romanos and beyond, into the city that still stands today. The journey begins with the ground itself, the 7 hills above the Golden Horn, the natural harbors on 3 sides, the narrow neck of land where walls could be built and held. From there, the founding, the forum laid out in stone, the Hippodrome raised for 100,000 spectators, the porphyry column lifted at the heart of the new capital, dedicated on the 11th of May, 330. Then the rise. The great Theodosian walls completed in 413, 6.5 kilometers of triple defense, 96 towers, 10 gates. The peak under Justinian, when Hagia Sophia rose in just 5 years and its dome was suspended 56 meters above a floor of polished marble. The daily life inside, the chariot factions, the bread granaries, the underground cisterns held up by forests of columns, the silk workshops, the maze running from the Million to the Golden Gate. Then the crises. The Avar and Persian armies turned back, Greek fire burning on the water. The catastrophe of 1204, when Crusader ships breached the sea walls. The slow decline, the empty districts returning to farmland, and the final siege of 1453, when Mehmed II brought 80,000 troops and bronze cannons that hurled stones weighing 600 kilograms against walls that had stood for 1,000 years. The walls still stand. Hagia Sophia still stands. The cisterns still hold water beneath the streets. This is not a ruin. This is a city that transformed, layer upon layer, into the metropolis that bridges 2 continents still. If you find meaning in the complete journeys of cities that shaped the world, subscribe and stay close. Every chapter ahead opens another gate of a world built in stone, brick, and unbroken ambition. The story starts with the ground beneath the city, and the choice to build here at all. The strait is 1,500 meters wide at its narrowest point. On the western shore, a triangular peninsula juts into the water where the Bosphorus opens into the Sea of Marmara. 7 hills rise from the waterline, their slopes descending to natural harbors on 3 sides. To the north, the Golden Horn curves inland for 7 kilometers, a sheltered anchorage deep enough for the largest ships. To the south, the Sea of Marmara stretches toward the Aegean. To the east, across the strait, the hills of Asia begin. Every vessel sailing between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea must pass through this channel. Every army marching from Europe into Asia, or from Asia into Europe, must cross here. The peninsula commands both passages. Stand on its eastern promontory and you can see the current flowing south through the Bosphorus, carrying Black Sea water toward the Mediterranean. The surface current runs at 4 to 5 knots. Beneath it, a deeper countercurrent flows north, bringing salt water from the Aegean. The strait is a hinge between 2 seas, 2 continents, two worlds. The Greeks understood this in the 7th century before Christ. Colonists from Megara founded Byzantium on the peninsula's eastern tip around 667 before the Common Era. They built their acropolis on the first hill, overlooking the point where the Bosphorus meets the Marmara. The colony prospered on customs duties collected from ships passing through the strait. Persian armies besieged it. Spartan fleets blockaded it. Philip of Macedon tried to take it and failed. The walls held. The location was too valuable to abandon. 6 centuries later, the Roman Empire was splitting along its seams. Rome itself lay too far west to control the eastern provinces. The Danube frontier, the Persian border, the grain routes from Egypt, all required a capital closer to the empire's center of gravity. In 324 of the Common Era, Constantine defeated his rival Licinius near Chrysopolis, across the Bosphorus from Byzantium. Standing on the Asian shore after the battle, Constantine looked west at the peninsula and saw what the Megarian colonists had seen 1,000 years before. He crossed the strait and walked the hills. The peninsula was 2 kilometers wide at its base, where it joined the Thracian mainland. From there, it extended 5 kilometers east into the water, tapering to a point. The first hill rose 100 meters above sea level. The second hill stood slightly inland. Between them, a saddle of lower ground connected to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th hills running southwest. The 6th and 7th hills formed the southern edge of the peninsula, overlooking the Marmara. The northern slope descended to the Golden Horn. The southern slope fell to the sea. The eastern tip commanded the Bosphorus. Constantine ordered his engineers to survey the ground. They measured the distance from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara along the peninsula's western edge, 6.5 kilometers. They marked the line where the new walls would rise, extending the city's boundaries more than 1 kilometer west of the old Greek fortifications. They laid out a forum on the second hill, aligned with the rising sun. They traced the path of a great street, the Mese, that would run from the forum to the Golden Gate at the southwestern corner of the new walls. They designated the first hill, the Acropolis of Old Byzantium, as the site for the imperial palace complex, overlooking the Bosphorus and the Sea of Marmara. On the northern slope, between the 2nd and 3rd hills, they marked the ground for a hippodrome. The structure would be 500 meters long and 120 meters wide, built into the hillside with its curved end facing north toward the Golden Horn. 100,000 spectators would fill its tiers. The emperor would watch from the Kathisma, the imperial box connected directly to the palace by a covered passage. The Hippodrome would be the heart of the new city's public life, the place where the emperor appeared before his people, where political factions clashed, where the rhythm of urban life found its pulse. Constantine brought architects and craftsmen from across the empire. They quarried limestone from the hills south of the city. They imported marble from the island of Protagonist in the Sea of Marmara, 20 kilometers southwest. They stripped monuments from older cities, columns from temples, statues from forums, obelisks from Egypt, and shipped them to the construction site. The porphyry column that would stand at the center of Constantine's forum came from Rome itself, a deliberate transfer of imperial authority from the old capital to the new. The walls rose first, limestone blocks laid in courses, reinforced with brick, following the line the engineers had marked from the Golden Horn to the Marmara. 10 gates pierced the circuit, each flanked by towers. The Golden Gate, at the southwestern corner, would be reserved for imperial triumphs, its arch faced with marble and fitted with bronze doors. Inside the walls, the city took shape. The Forum with its porphyry column rising 40 meters above the pavement, the Hippodrome carved into the hillside, the church of Hagia Irene, Holy Peace, on the first hill near the palace site, the Milion, a vaulted monument marking the 0 point from which all distances in the Eastern Empire would be measured. On the 11th of May, 330, Constantine dedicated the city. He named it New Rome. Within a generation, it would be known by another name, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. The location had made it inevitable. The strait, the harbors, the hills, the position between two continents, this was where the empire's center had to be. Constantine had not chosen the ground. The ground had chosen itself. The city grew faster than anyone had imagined. Within 5 years of the dedication, the population had doubled. Within 20, it had doubled again. Merchants arrived from Antioch and Alexandria, artisans from Rome and Athens, administrators from every province of the Eastern Empire. They came because Constantine had made this the seat of imperial power, and power drew everything toward itself: wealth, talent, ambition, labor. The Forum became the commercial heart, its colonnades sheltering shops that sold silk from Persia, grain from Egypt, wine from the Aegean Islands, olive oil from Syria. The porphyry column at the center, quarried in the Egyptian desert, shipped across the Mediterranean, hauled up the hill by teams of oxen, stood as a permanent marker of imperial presence. At its base, Constantine placed relics, fragments said to be from the true cross, the baskets from the feeding of the 5,000, the alabaster jar of anointing oil. The column was not merely decoration. It was a declaration that this city stood under divine protection. The Hippodrome stretched 450 meters along the slope of the second hill, its southern end carved into bedrock, its northern end supported on massive vaulted substructures that created storage chambers and workshops beneath the seating tiers. The track could hold 12 chariots racing 7 laps around the central spine, the spina, which Constantine decorated with monuments brought from across the empire. An Egyptian obelisk of pink granite covered in hieroglyphs, a bronze serpent column taken from Delphi, where it had stood for 800 years, a second obelisk faced with bronze plaques showing imperial victories. The Hippodrome seated 100,000. On race days, the entire city poured through its gates. The factions, blues and greens, reds and whites, filled separate sections, their colors marking not just sporting allegiance, but political and religious identity. Emperors watched from the Kathisma, the imperial box connected directly to the Great Palace by a covered passage. What happened in the Hippodrome mattered. Riots that began over a chariot race could topple governments. The palace complex spread across the southeastern tip of the peninsula, terraced down the slope toward the Sea of Marmara. Constantine's architects laid out a series of halls, courtyards, chapels, and gardens that would be expanded by every emperor for the next 3 centuries. The Chalca, the Bronze Gate, formed the main entrance from the Augustaion, the square that connected palace, hippodrome, and Senate House. Inside, the Magnora served as the throne room, its apse holding the imperial seat beneath a dome decorated with images of Christ and the apostles. Marble came from quarries on Prokonnesos in the Sea of Marmara, white stone with grey veining that could be polished to a mirror finish. Columns of green porphyry arrived from Sparta, red porphyry from Egypt. The floors were opus sectile, geometric patterns cut from coloured stone and fitted together without mortar. The palace was not a single building, but a city within the city, a labyrinth of power where access to the emperor's presence was controlled by layers of guards, eunuchs, and court officials. Water defined the city's capacity to grow. Constantine's engineers extended the aqueduct of Valens, begun under an earlier emperor, bringing water from sources 40 kilometers to the west. The aqueduct entered the city on a double tier of arches that crossed the valley between the 4th and 3rd hills, the water channel running 20 meters above street level. From there, distribution lines fed public fountains, bathhouses, and the palace. But surface distribution was not enough. The city needed storage, reserves that could sustain the population during siege or drought. The solution was to build underground. The first cisterns appeared in Constantine's reign, vaulted chambers carved into bedrock or built with brick and concrete, their roofs supported by forests of columns. The basilica cistern would come later, but the principle was established. Constantinople would store water beneath its streets, vast reserves held in darkness, accessible through stone stairways that descended from street level into cool, echoing chambers where the sound of dripping water never stopped. Churches rose on every hill. Hagia Irene, the Church of Holy Peace, stood near the palace. The Church of the Holy Apostles, built to hold Constantine's tomb, occupied the 4th hill at the center of the city. Smaller churches appeared in every district, neighborhood foundations endowed by wealthy families, monastic churches attached to communities of monks and nuns. The city's skyline became a landscape of domes and barrel vaults, terracotta tiles and lead sheeting, crosses rising above the roof lines. Christianity was not yet the empire's only religion. Pagan temples still functioned, though their influence was fading, but Constantine had made clear where imperial favor lay. The churches received land, tax exemptions, and the right to inherit property. Bishops gained judicial authority. The city was being shaped not just as a political capital, but as a Christian capital, the New Jerusalem. By 400, the population had reached 100,000. The original walls, built to enclose Constantine's city, no longer contained it. Suburbs spread beyond the gates, filling the land between the walls and the shoreline, climbing the hills to the west. The city had outgrown its boundaries. It needed new walls, a new perimeter that could protect not just what existed, but what would come. The decision was made under Theodosius II. The new walls would be built more than a kilometer west of Constantine's line, enclosing twice the area, creating room for a city of 500,000. Construction began in 408. The walls would take 5 years to complete. When they were finished, Constantinople would be locked inside the greatest fortification system the world had ever seen. The walls rose in 3 lines across the neck of the peninsula. From the Golden Horn in the north to the Sea of Marmara in the south, they stretched 6.5 kilometers, cutting the city off from the mainland, turning Constantinople into an island fortress connected to Europe by 10 fortified gates. The outermost line was a moat, 20 meters wide and 10 meters deep, its bottom lined with brick to prevent tunneling. Behind the moat stood the outer wall, 2 meters thick and 8 meters high, studded with towers at regular intervals. Behind that, separated by a terrace 15 meters wide, rose the inner wall, the true barrier. 12 meters high and 5 meters thick at the base, built of limestone blocks faced with brick in alternating bands, it was anchored by 96 towers spaced 55 meters apart. Each tower rose 5 meters above the wall-walk, providing overlapping fields of fire. The towers were square or octagonal, their interiors divided into multiple levels connected by wooden stairs, each level pierced with arrow slits and windows for artillery. The wall itself was hollow, its core filled with rubble and mortar, its outer faces dressed in carefully fitted stone. Every 50 meters, a postern gate allowed defenders to move between the terrace and the outer wall. Every kilometer, a major gate pierced both walls, its passage protected by iron-reinforced wooden doors and a portcullis that could be dropped from above. The Golden Gate stood at the southern end, where the Via Egnatia entered the city from the west. It was not a military gate, but a ceremonial one reserved for imperial triumphs. Its 3 arches were faced in marble, flanked by towers clad in polished stone. Bronze doors closed the central arch. Above the gate, inscriptions in Latin and Greek proclaimed the city's invincibility. Emperors returning from victorious campaigns entered through the Golden Gate and processed along the Macy to the Forum of Constantine, the entire route lined with crowds. The gate was opened perhaps once a decade. The rest of the time, it remained sealed, a symbol more than a passage. The working gates were further north. The Gate of St. Romanos, midway along the wall, opened onto the road to Thrace. The Gate of Carisius, near the highest point of the land walls, led to the military road along the Thracian frontier. The Gate of Adrianople, in the northern section, connected to the road that bore its name. Each gate was a fortress in itself, with towers on either side, a courtyard between the outer and inner gates, and murder holes in the vaulted ceiling through which defenders could pour boiling oil or drop stones on attackers who breached the outer door. The gates were the weak points, and they were designed accordingly. An enemy who forced the outer gate would find himself trapped in a stone box under fire from 3 sides, with the inner gate still barred ahead. The walls were completed in 413, but they did not stand for long in their original form. In 447, an earthquake shook the city for months. 57 towers collapsed. Long sections of the inner wall crumbled. The outer wall was breached in multiple places. The moat filled with rubble. And at that moment, Attila the Hun was marching west across Thrace with an army that had never been stopped. Constantinople had 60 days, perhaps less, before the Huns reached the walls. The city mobilized. The emperor ordered every able-bodied man to the walls. The circus factions, the Blues and the Greens, whose rivalry had sparked riots in the Hippodrome, were organized into work gangs. Stonemasons, bricklayers, laborers, soldiers, and citizens worked in shifts around the clock. In 60 days, they rebuilt the walls. They cleared the moat, raised the fallen towers, repaired the breaches, and added a second outer wall in front of the first, creating a 4th line of defense. When Attila's scouts reached the walls, they found them intact, manned and impregnable. The Huns turned south into Greece. Constantinople had saved itself through labor. The walls defined the city's shape for the next 1,000 years. Inside them, the population grew to 500,000. Outside them, nothing was built. The land beyond the moat remained open, a killing ground where no attacker could find cover. The walls were maintained, repaired after every earthquake, strengthened after every siege. Towers were heightened, gates were reinforced, the moat was deepened. By the 6th century, the Theodosian walls were the most formidable fortification in the world, and they would remain so until the age of gunpowder. They were not just a barrier, they were a statement. Constantinople could not be taken by force. It could only be starved, betrayed, or outlasted. And for 800 years, no enemy managed any of those. Behind those walls, in the early years of the 6th century, the city reaches towards something the walls cannot measure. Under Justinian, who takes the throne in 527, Constantinople passes 500,000 souls and becomes the largest city in the Christian world. The Maze runs thick with merchants from Alexandria, Antioch, Trebizond, and Ravenna. Silk arrives from beyond the Persian frontier. Wheat pours in from Egypt through the harbors of the Golden Horn. The great palace spreads across the slope above the Sea of Marmara, its halls floored in porphyry and serpentine, its terraces opening to the strait. Then, in January of 532, the city nearly destroys itself. The chariot factions of the Hippodrome, the Blues and the Greens, turn against the throne. For 5 days the Nika riots burn through the heart of the capital. The old Senate House collapses in flame. The baths of Zeuxippus are gutted, and the Basilica of Hagia Sophia, the second church to stand on that ground, is reduced to blackened stone. When the smoke clears, perhaps 30,000 lie dead in the Hippodrome, and the ceremonial center of the empire is a field of ash. Justinian begins rebuilding within 40 days. He does not restore what has been lost. He raises something the world has not seen. The architects are Anthemius of Tralles, a mathematician, and Isidore of Miletus, a geometer. They are not builders by trade. They are thinkers, and they conceive a church whose central space will be defined not by columns or arches, but by a single dome of unprecedented scale, suspended on pendentives over a square of vast proportion. Construction lasts 5 years and 10 months. 10,000 laborers work across the site. Stone arrives from every quarter of the empire. Green marble from Thessaly, white from Proconnesus, yellow from Numidia, porphyry columns reused from older sanctuaries, 8 massive shafts brought from ancient temples in the east. The dome itself, 31 meters across and rising 56 meters above the marble floor, is built of light, hollow bricks fired on roads. At its base, 40 arched windows pierce the masonry, so that when the sun rises, the dome appears to float on a ring of light, unattached to the walls beneath it. On the 27th of December, in the year 537, Hagia Sophia is consecrated. Inside, 30 million tesserae of gold and colored glass cover the vaults. 107 columns support the galleries. The total cost, in gold alone, runs to £320,000. The interior holds no painted figures yet, only crosses and patterns and the unbroken shimmer of gold across curved surfaces. Light enters through scores of windows and is returned by the mosaics, so that the air itself seems to glow. The church redefines the city. Every traveller approaching along the Mese, every ship rounding the point of the peninsula, sees its dome above the rooftops, lead-sheathed and pale against the sky. It becomes the spiritual axis of the empire, the seat of the patriarch, the stage of imperial coronations. Beside it, the great palace and the hippodrome form a single ceremonial heart, a triangle of dome, throne, and arena that will hold the rhythm of Byzantine life for the next 900 years. The dome rises above the city, but the city itself spreads outward and downward, a living organism of 500,000 souls moving through streets that follow the contours of 7 hills. The main artery runs west from the Million, the marble milestone that marks the center of the empire, all the way to the Golden Gate in the Theodosian walls. This is the Maze, the middle street, and it carries the pulse of Constantinople. The Maze is 30 meters wide, paved in limestone blocks worn smooth by centuries of feet, hooves, and cartwheels. Colonnades line both sides, their marble columns supporting roofs that shelter shops and workshops. The street rises and falls with the terrain, passing through forums where it widens into open squares surrounded by porticos. At the Forum of Constantine, the porphyry column still stands, 40 meters high, crowned with a statue of the emperor as Apollo. At the Forum of Theodosius, a triumphal arch frames the western view. Between these nodes, the city unfolds in layers, residential districts climbing the slopes, churches with their domes and bell towers, monasteries with walled gardens, public baths releasing steam into the morning air. Water is everywhere, though most of it is hidden. The city drinks from aqueducts that carry water from sources 40 kilometers away in the Belgrade forest. The aqueduct of Valens, completed in the late 4th century, crosses the valley between the 3rd and 4th hills on 2 tiers of arches, the upper tier rising 29 meters above street level. The water flows into distribution tanks, and from there into a network of underground cisterns that hold reserves against siege or drought. The largest of these, built under Justinian after the Nika riots, lies beneath the streets southwest of Hagia Sophia. It is a forest of columns, 336 of them arranged in 12 rows of 28, each column 9 meters tall, supporting a vaulted brick ceiling. The floor is submerged under 4 meters of water, dark and still, reflecting the columns in perfect symmetry. The cistern can hold 80,000 cubic meters, enough to supply the Great Palace and the surrounding districts for months. Other cisterns lie scattered throughout the city, some open to the sky, others covered, all fed by the same aqueduct system that makes urban life at this density possible. The Hippodrome dominates the eastern slope, its long axis running parallel to the shore. It seats 100,000 spectators on stone benches that rise in tiers above the track. The spina, the central barrier, is decorated with monuments brought from across the empire. An Egyptian obelisk of pink granite carved with hieroglyphs, a bronze serpent column from Delphi, a second obelisk faced in bronze plaques. The races are not entertainment alone. The 2 main factions, the Blues and the Greens, represent more than chariot teams. They are political organizations with their own militias, their own neighborhoods, their own seats in the Hippodrome. Emperors align with one faction or the other. Riots begin here. In 532, during the Nika riots, the factions united against Justinian, burned half the city, and nearly drove him from the throne. 30,000 died before order was restored. The Hippodrome was rebuilt. The races resumed. Bread comes from 14 imperial granaries, massive stone warehouses near the harbors where grain ships from Egypt unload their cargoes. The grain is distributed free to citizens registered on the civic rolls, a continuation of the Roman annona system. The bakeries work through the night, their ovens glowing, the smell of baking bread drifting through the streets before dawn. By mid-morning, lines form at the distribution points. The system feeds 200,000 people, a third of the city's population. Silk is an imperial monopoly. The workshops are located in the Great Palace complex, behind guarded doors. The raw silk arrives from Persia or, after the 6th century, from imperial sericulture farms in Syria and Greece. The weavers work on vertical looms, creating fabrics in purple, gold, and crimson, patterned with eagles, lions, and crosses. The finest silks are reserved for the emperor and the court. Lesser grades are sold in the covered markets along the Meuse, where merchants from across the known world come to trade. Furs from the north, spices from India, ivory from Africa, amber from the Baltic. The markets are roofed structures with stone vaults, lit by oil lamps, the air thick with the smell of incense, leather, and sweat. Churches are everywhere. By the 12th century there are over 400 within the walls. Some are small chapels attached to monasteries or private houses. Others are large basilicas with multiple aisles and galleries. The Church of the Holy Apostles, second only to Hagia Sophia, holds the tombs of emperors in a circular mausoleum beneath 5 domes. The Church of St. Polyioktos, built in the early 6th century, rivals Hagia Sophia in scale and decoration, its interior covered in carved marble peacocks, vines, and inscriptions. Monasteries occupy entire districts, their walls enclosing churches, refectories, libraries, and gardens. The Staudios Monastery, founded in the 5th century, houses 1,000 monks and maintains one of the largest scriptoria in the Christian world, where scribes copy manuscripts in Greek and Latin. The Great Palace is not a single building, but a sprawling complex of halls, chapels, barracks, and gardens covering 40 hectares on the southeastern tip of the peninsula. It descends in terraces from the Hippodrome to the sea, connected by covered walkways and staircases. The Chrysotriklinos, the golden throne room, is octagonal, its dome covered in gold mosaics, its floor paved in opus sectile, geometric patterns cut from colored marble. The emperor receives ambassadors here, seated on a throne flanked by mechanical lions that roar and golden birds that sing. The Bukolion Palace, at the lowest terrace, opens directly onto the sea, with a private harbor where imperial galleys dock. The palace gardens are planted with fruit trees, roses, and fountains fed by the cisterns below. The rhythm of the city is set by bells and processions. On feast days, the emperor processes from the palace to Hagia Sophia, preceded by guards in gilded armor, followed by senators in silk robes, the patriarch carrying relics in jeweled reliquaries. The route is lined with crowds. Incense burns in bronze censers. Choirs sing from the galleries of churches along the way. The procession moves slowly, stopping at shrines and chapels, the emperor dismounting to venerate icons. The ceremony can last hours. It is theater, politics, and worship combined, a display of imperial power and divine favor enacted in the streets. At night, the city dims, but does not sleep. Oil lamps burn in windows. Taverns stay open near the harbors. The watch patrols the walls and the main streets, their torches moving through the darkness. From the sea, the city is a line of lights along the shore, the dome of Hagia Sophia a dark mass against the stars. Inside the walls, 500,000 people live, work, pray, and die, their lives shaped by the stone and water and bread that make this density possible. The city is a machine, and it runs. The machine runs, but it must defend itself. In the summer of the year 626, a darker traffic fills the land beyond the walls. Avar horsemen, tens of thousands strong, pour down from the Danube with siege engines and Slavic infantry. Across the Bosphorus, a Persian army camps within sight of the dome, the smoke from their fires drifting over the strait. For 1 month the city is encircled by land and watched by sea. The Theodosian walls hold. When Avar canoes attempt the Golden Horn, Byzantine dromons ram them under, and the siege breaks against stone and water. Half a century later, Arab fleets sail up through the Sea of Marmara in the year 674, and for 4 summers they return, blockading the harbours and probing the gates. It is in these years that a Syrian engineer named Kallinikos brings a secret to the imperial workshops. From bronze siphons mounted in the prows of warships, a liquid flame is sprayed across the water, burning on the surface of the sea, clinging to wood and sail and rope. The recipe is guarded so closely that no chronicler ever records its full composition. The Arabs call it the Roman fire. To later generations, it becomes Greek fire. By the year 678, the besieging fleet is ash on the waves. The greater test comes in the year 717. An Arab army of 100,000 surrounds the land walls, and 1,800 ships fill the Marmara. The siege lasts a full year. Through the winter, snow falls on the camps, and famine and disease move among the tents. Byzantine dromons sweep from the Golden Horn, jets of flame arcing across the harbour. By the following August, the Arab fleet has burned, and the survivors withdraw across Anatolia. The walls have not been breached. For 5 centuries afterward, no army takes the city. Earthquakes shake the dome, and it is rebuilt. Fires sweep through the wooden quarters, and they are razed again. Plague thins the population, and the population recovers. Emperors rise and fall within the great palace, but the walls remain. Then, in the spring of the year 1204, the threat arrives not from the steppes or the deserts, but from the sea, and from fellow Christians. The Fourth Crusade, diverted from its journey to the Holy Land, anchors in the Golden Horn. Venetian galleys, their masts taller than the sea walls, lash flying bridges to the towers along the harbour. On the 13th of April, the wall is taken from the waterside. For 3 days the Crusaders sack the city. The great palace is stripped. The bronze horses of the Hippodrome are pried from their pedestals and shipped to Venice, where they still stand above the doors of St. Mark's. Reliquaries are broken open, gold mosaics chipped from walls, manuscripts burned for warmth in winter camps. The treasures of 9 centuries scatter across Latin Europe. For 57 years, a Latin emperor sits on the throne. Districts empty. Roofs collapse into weeds. When Michael VIII Palaiologos enters through the Golden Gate in the year 1261 and restores Byzantine rule, he returns to a capital half-haunted, its harbours silted, its mosaics dulled, its population a fraction of what the walls were built to hold. The machine still runs, but its fires burn low. The fires burn low, and they will not rise again. The century that follows the restoration is a slow inventory of loss. Whole quarters of the city, once dense with tenements and workshops, return to orchard and vineyard. Goats graze inside the Theodosian gates. The walls of houses become the walls of gardens. Inside the perimeter built for 500,000, perhaps 80,000 souls remain, and the empty ground between them grows each year. The great palace, abandoned by the restored emperors, is left to weather. Its sea-facing terraces crack. Marble revetment falls from the walls and is carried away for new churches and small chapels in the still-living districts. The court moves to the Blachernai, in the northwest corner against the land walls, a smaller complex, easier to heat, easier to defend. From its windows the imperial household looks out not on a capital, but on the suburbs of a vanished one. In the year 1347, Genoese ships from the Black Sea bring something heavier than cargo. Within months the plague moves through the cisterns districts and the harbour quarters. It empties monasteries. It hollows the silk workshops. By the time it passes, perhaps a third of those who remained are gone, and the population that rebuilds is smaller, poorer, more scattered through the ruins. The plague returns again and again, each generation thinned by its own visitation. Civil war does the rest. Through the middle decades of the 14th century, rival emperors and regents tear at one another while Ottoman forces move quietly across Thrace, taking towns the city once defended. By the late 1300s, the Byzantine emperor pays tribute to the Sultan. The empire, in any meaningful sense, has shrunk to the city itself and a handful of Aegean coasts. Inside Hagia Sophia, candles still burn beneath the great dome, but the gold mosaics are dulled by smoke, and the patches of fallen plaster are no longer repaired with skill. Roofs leak. Lead is stripped from lesser churches to mend greater ones. Aqueducts, damaged in old earthquakes, are left only partly restored. Cisterns silt. Some are abandoned to darkness, their forests of columns standing in still water beneath ground that bears no memory of them. In the year 1451, on the European shore of the Bosphorus, only 700 meters north of the land walls, Ottoman engineers begin to build. They raise 3 great towers and a curtain of stone in less than 5 months. The fortress is called Rumeli Hizara, and its cannons command the strait. From its parapets, gunners can sink any ship moving between the Black Sea and the Marmara. The grain that fed the city for 1,000 years now passes only with permission. From the towers of the Theodosian walls, the new fortress is plainly visible across the water, pale stone above dark current. The walls themselves stand as they have stood for 10 centuries, their bricks and limestone bands weathered but whole, the moat still cut, the towers still ranged at their measured intervals. They are ready. They have always been ready. What is missing is the city behind them, the granaries, the legions, the 500,000 hands that once made the machine run. In the spring of 1453, the watchmen on the outer wall begin to see, far to the west, a darker line on the horizon than the dust of any column they have known. The Ottoman army is coming, and this time it does not intend to leave. The line on the horizon thickens into shape. By the 6th of April, 1453, the Ottoman army stands at the foot of the Theodosian walls, 80,000 strong, tents stretching from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara. Behind the lines wait the great bronze guns cast by the Hungarian engineer Orban, the largest more than 8 meters long, capable of hurling stone balls weighing 600 kilograms. The defenders within number perhaps 7,000, commanded by Constantine XI, last of an imperial line that traces back, in unbroken ceremony, to the founder. the bombardment begins. Day after day the cannons speak across the moat, and towers that have stood for 1,040 years begin, for the first time, to crumble. The defenders work through each night to fill the breaches with timber, earth, and barrels of rubble, and each dawn the gunners find their work undone. Sea walls along the Golden Horn are crossed by Ottoman ships dragged overland on greased logs. For 53 days the rhythm holds. In the small hours of the 29th of May, the final assault breaks against the central stretch of wall near the gate of St. Romanus. Wave after wave climbs into the breach. By mid-morning, an Ottoman banner flies from a tower of the inner wall. The emperor is last seen fighting on foot among the rubble, his purple cast aside. The city falls by midday. In the afternoon, Mehmed II, 21 years old, rides along the ancient Mese, past the broken forums, toward the great church. He dismounts at the threshold of Hagia Sophia and steps inside. The dome still floats, the mosaics still shine. By his order, the church becomes a mosque before nightfall. After 1123 years, Constantinople is no longer the capital of the Romans. It is Istanbul, capital of the Ottomans. What follows is not erasure but accumulation. The walls are repaired. The cisterns continue to hold water. New mosques rise upon the foundations of Byzantine churches, their minarets joining domes already old. The Hippodrome becomes a public square, its obelisks still standing where the spina once divided the race course. The Topkapi Palace climbs the first hill, where Constantine once laid out his forum. The centuries pass quietly over the stones. In the year 1545, a traveller hears that residents of one quarter draw water and even fish through holes in their cellars, and so the basilica cistern is rediscovered, its 336 columns still standing in still dark water. In modern Istanbul, a city of 15 million, the Theodosian walls still trace their long line from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara, breached in places, weathered everywhere, but unmistakably the same ramparts. Hagia Sophia stands among them, its Christian figures emerging from beneath plaster, sharing the air with calligraphy of later centuries. The peninsula Constantine chose remains what it was. Two seas still meet here, two continents still touch. Beneath the traffic, beneath the markets, beneath the layered rooftops, the bones of the Queen of Cities are still in place, holding up everything that came after.